So we're back with more StarCraft cards to review in Hearthstone. And we got a new hero card that looks kind of insane here, kicking it off with Jim Raynor. This is a 7-cost, 5-armor hero card. It is part of the Terran faction, which means it can be played in Paladin, Shaman, and Warrior. And this battle cry: relaunch every starship that you launched this game, which can be like an insane amount of stuff if you've obviously gotten off multiple starships, which we saw in yesterday's review that the kind of neutral Terran cards in particular are going to be giving you all of those cheap little starship pieces and ways to discount your starship launches as well. So it seems like this is kind of building towards a plan where you're getting maybe quicker, cheaper starships, getting multiples going, you know, as early as like turn 4, pretty cheap one, and maybe again on like turn 6 or something, right? And by the time you get to turn 7, maybe you're getting like 2 pretty solid sized starships out of your Jim Raynor. You're also getting this hero power stim pack, 2 mana, summon a 2/2 marine with taunt, and give your Terran minions +2 attack. So I guess that's really kind of like summoning a 4/2 with taunt. I'm assuming, despite not having the token, that is indeed a Terran. I think we saw those tokens somewhere else. So, you know, a little board building here. We're also going to see some Paladin Terran cards that do care about having stuff on board, and some starship pieces that care about having stuff on board. So you can kind of almost get this little swarm starship thing going, particularly in Paladin, which is kind of treading on Zerg's ground a little bit, but nonetheless a bit of a game plan. Now, do keep in mind, you know, Jim Raynor here is limited to these 3 classes, so don't start cooking stuff up with the previous starship classes from the full set. If you're already thinking about like Starship Rogue and all the shenanigans you can do there, this is not a Rogue card. I'm sure Rogue can find some way to generate this or find it occasionally, but that at the very least wouldn't be a reliable game plan, because again, this is just Paladin, Shaman, and Warrior. So really, I think for Jim Raynor, it's going to be the same question as all the other starship stuff. Like, are these new starship pieces and starships being accessible to these new classes going to create an actual viable starship deck? If so, you have to imagine Jim Raynor makes some sense there, because, you know, you're spending 7 mana here. You're often going to get 7 mana worth of stuff out of multiple starships. Sometimes even one starship will often feel worth 7. You know, you sometimes spend 5 on them, of course, but when you consider the hero power bonus, little armor, and the upside of having maybe multiple starships, clearly that can feel like an efficient play, but the deck has to be good. I don't think this is enough reason in and of itself to make a starship deck get there. And we're kind of trying this out in 3 new classes that still don't have any proven models. And we're going to look at a starship piece for Paladin that I'm not that into. I wasn't that into the starship piece specifically for Shaman. The neutral starship stuff looks kind of okay. I guess we can review that real quick again. Here are those 5 neutral starship pieces available to Terran. Like, I do think some of these are pretty interesting and ultimately not too expensive to get going either with stuff like Starport. So, you know, I don't want to write it off totally, but I still have some fears that it's not going to be enough, and that these starships are a little bit passive and a little bit delayed, and Raynor might have to come down too late to make a necessary sort of swing. So it's cool, it's big, but I have concerns. So moving on to some Protoss cards here. We've got Warp Gate, a new location, 4 mana. Protoss, as a reminder, is available to Druid, Mage, Priest, and Rogue. And it's all about discounts and big minions. Here, the Warp Gate certainly plays to that. Your next Protoss minion costs 3 less. So, of course, that can help you cheat out something immediately the turn you play Warp Gate, so you maybe don't feel so bad spending 4 setting up this location. For instance, we're going to take a look at the Void Ray. Pretty natural follow-up here. This goes to 0, has this battle cry. If this costs 0, gain +2/+2. So this becomes a 5/3 Rush Divine Shield that you can play on turn 4. That kind of cements your Warp Gate turn. Make sure you don't fall too far behind, you know, clear something out from your opponent. And then that leaves behind the Warp Gate for the bigger, scarier stuff down the road, of which, you know, we saw some in Druid. We're actually going to see another big potential payoff card in Druid, and it seems like these other classes are going to have some big ones as well. So that looks pretty scary. Also, you know, do note that this I guess technically stacks. Like I think you could hit this twice and make it cost 6 less. There might be some like silly combo stuff possible where you make something effectively 0 and you play it with something else that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Could be some scariness happening there. And ultimately too, this is like, you just play this on turn 4. If you don't use the discount right away, you could play an 8 drop on turn 5. So you're going to be able to cheat out some things faster than you otherwise might expect. So all in all, this does just bundle a lot of cost discounts, synergizes really hard with Protoss, both like immediately, directly with Void Ray, but in general as well. So I think if you're leaning into Protoss, you want to lean in super hard. And I think Druid in particular seems like a nice home for Protoss. I think this card will definitely make sense in Druid. This is the sort of thing they love. So here's that Void Ray, 3 mana, 3/1 mech, Rush, Divine Shield, Battlecry. If this costs 0, gain +2/+2. Again, I think if you're running Protoss, this probably gets a nod in your deck. I could maybe see like Druid cutting it because like, well, we got enough going on. We can give up a turn 4 and not feel too bad. We don't need to play the Void Ray to stabilize. We're just gonna do some awesome big thing later. So you could see some packages cutting this. Others might feel like it's just mandatory. I don't even think it's that terrible at a base level, by the way. Sometimes a 3/1 Rush Divine Shield is going to feel pretty useful. Just keep it up on board a little bit, and anytime you get that little extra bonus on it's great. And, there are going to be a lot of ways to discount Protoss. We've already seen a handful. So it's going to get down to 0 rather often. It's not just through Warp Gate. There's going to be lots of other mechanisms to make this more interesting. So next up, this card's crazy. Chrono Boost, a 4 mana Protoss spell. Draw 2 Protoss cards. Again, really enforcing that you want to go super focused on these Protoss cards. Although, that could actually be a reason to cut something like Void Ray. If you want to hit really prime targets, maybe this feels bad. You want to hit some big stuff instead. But anyway, just good tutored card draw. And then also summon a 3/4 Zealot with Charge. So, getting a little board presence too. A little bit of aggression here and there. I don't think this deck's going to be looking for like raw aggression. I think often this will probably realistically be a 3/4 with Rush because you just want to trade it into something. But again, that helps you kind of shore up that turn 4 so you're not sacrificing too much. Whether you're playing Warp Gate or Chrono Boost, they each maybe give you some ways to start stabilizing a little bit quicker on board while still generating, of course, a ton of stuff in hand. And that makes this pretty interesting. Slightly expensive for card draw, but I think the 3/4 is so solid. That's the card that would easily cost 3 anyway. Kind of feels like you're getting this card draw as a cheap bonus instead, and that looks great. So let's actually move over to this Druid card, the final Druid card we're going to see. We saw 2 previously. This is, again, Protoss. It's Immortal. And Immortal is a 7 mana 5/8 mech with Taunt and Divine Shield and Battlecry. Spend 4 mana to double this minion's stats. And with this kind of Battlecry, that's not like a choice you have. If, you're in an 11 mana turn because you're Druid, and you play this, it's automatically going to spin that final 4 for you and double this up to a 10/16, which needless to say, that's a very, very big card. I will say there's a bit of a diminishing return a little bit on the size of big taunts because sometimes 8 health is a big enough taunt to shut down like an aggressive board push from your opponent. And, the difference between 8 health and 16 health is exactly the same when your opponent has some kind of single target removal efficiency. Sometimes it's even riskier to play big stuff because if they steal it from you, which so many things can do these days, then you have an even bigger problem facing you down. So I don't know that the stat scaling here is always going to be all that exciting. Sometimes also this could feel a little bit limiting if you for some reason wanted to like play this first to create some hand size, but then it like spends your mana automatically and you're like, oh god, that sucks. But do keep in mind also, this is a card that might cost way less. This might cost 4 mana, and then suddenly, you're kind of getting an 8 mana 10/16 with Taunt and Divine Shield, which that's more interesting. Also noteworthy, this is a pretty good taunt for something like Hydration Station. Could we see this card in a Dungar deck? You lose the Battlecry upside, but still, Taunt Divine Shield is pretty spicy, and it could serve as the kind of Dark Beyond Dungar card. Maybe Protoss and Dungar have some kind of fusion deck, and this fits that need really well. We previously saw that big carrier in Druid. This is another card I think could actually be interesting off Dungar, but isn't as good with Hydration Station, so there could be some conflicts there. Or maybe you just go all in on Protoss, and this is kind of your stabilizer, and this is your like threat and response in a way as well. And between the two, you're just off to the races. So I think this is actually pretty interesting. The Divine Shield taunt combo is sticky enough and annoying enough, and sometimes the stats will be threatening enough that it does feel useful in a Protoss package for sure. So moving on over to the Paladin cards here. This is that Starship piece I teased. We're back in Terran cards. This is a 2-mana 1/1 mech. Starship piece, Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each other friendly minion. This also triggers on launch. So, swarm based deck, right? You want dudes and the little marines and tutus and all this stuff, and you make your ultra capacitor a little bit bigger. I just don't actually think this scales all that well. You know, you got 6 other dudes on board. You know, okay, it gets big. It's still just kind of a pile of stats. In that case, it's not that big. We've had other cards that get that big this affordably, probably with an easier condition as well. And beyond that, it's not often going to be easy to have that many things on board, particularly if you try to play this on curve, like on turn 2. You're just unlikely to have much of anything. So weird. I think very often this is going to gain like 1/1 or 2/2 or, you know, maybe 3/3 in a great scenario, and it's still not really going to feel all that impactful. And then when it comes back on the launch, I mean, yeah, maybe you've had more time to build a wide board there, but then I feel like the stats aren't really all that meaningful. It's just stats for stats' sake. There's not a lot of stuff that scales with those stats. Like if you look at the other Starship pieces that we looked at earlier, oh God, where is the screen? You know, none of these actually scale with your stats. Bonus effects kind of technically do on Raven if you get like Lifesteal or Rush or something, but the rest of these are just, they don't care about stats. They just do what they do. So, you know, most of the time it's just going to be kind of a big pile of numbers, which I don't know if that's going to be like threatening enough in its own right. And it's also still like really conditional. And despite Starships being cheaper, it might still be hard sometimes to get a wide good board to support the ultra capacitor. And I don't even know if you really want to get the wide board to support it. It just doesn't go that far. So to me, this actually looks pretty clunky and slow and conditional and awkward. And this is not a reason I'm excited, I don't think, to play Starship Paladin at the least, which we've got another Starship card here with Salvage the Bunker, 3-mana spell. Summon 2/2/2 Marines with Taunt, and your next Starship costs 2 less. So, you know, this is clearly designed to go together. Obviously Starship discounts, but also a couple bodies on board. But it's still not like that quick of a board development or that wide of a board development, right? It's just 2 dudes. You know, there are other Paladin cards now and historically that can summon much wider boards for more or less the same kind of resource commitment, mana cost and otherwise. You know, Muster for Battle comes to mind as a 3-cost card. Like clearly this has other upsides, I get it, but I'm just saying like it doesn't really go all that wide, and you could theoretically play these on the same turn, but still not really. That's not a turn I'm pumped about. And then I'm discounting my Starship, which I'm really maybe not all that pumped about. Is this really the payoff you want for like an aggressive wide board kind of deck? One card that goes moderately taller. I'm not convinced that it is. I don't know. This just doesn't sing to me. I do like this card inherently more. Like it's just a couple good bodies. The taunt is nice. The Starship discount adds up. Like this feels efficient, but the fact that it's rewarding something so unsatisfying, in my mind anyway, the ultra capacitor here, I don't know. I think they both kind of fail together, perhaps, in my mind. Now, looking at the third Paladin card and our final card for this video, the Hellion, this is more intriguing to me. 4-mana 4/4 mech. Your other minions have +1 attack and transforms if you launched a Starship this game. It turns into the Hellbat. It's literally a transformer. And that has your other minions have +2 attack and rush, which that's way better, right? This is finally an interesting payoff for a wide board kind of strategy. I mean, the +2 attack makes this, you know, a lethal threat in its own right. And then the rush aspect, that can be nice too. Summon a bunch of stuff, trade it in, you know, that's good. So both kind of a follow-up card, you know, recovery card on board in some cases. Got those Houndmaster Shaw vibes a little bit. I like that more, but notably, you know, it only gets good to me after you've launched a Starship. So you really are, you know, having to commit to this entire game plan, which I could imagine a wide board Paladin deck being solid. right? I could imagine that working okay. But when you're running a lot of things that maybe you aren't as excited about, like the Ultra Capacitor, like maybe some of the neutral Terran cards that are okay, but not the most supportive again, you know, that becomes a little shakier when I envision the whole deck together. I just feel like it's not going to be paying off fast enough, because although the starships are discounted and stuff, it's still going to be a mid-game play. Then the Hellbat has to come down after that. It's hard to line up kind of a curve and a turn-by-turn process where I see this really working and the Hellbat coming down at the right time to make the right swing. By the time you're playing the Hellbat, you might lose your wide board, right? By the time you launch your starship, your wide board might be gone. Then you got to redevelop, and you can use the Hellbat to kind of like stabilize on board a little bit, but then you're kind of not on a wide board again, and you're just always a step behind, basically. I think a deck that's maybe more aggressive and more all in on a game plan, because this aggression has this kind of starship buffer baked into it, if that makes sense. Like, you're spending time, turns, cards, getting starships that don't really cement the game plan all that well, again, in my mind. So I think this is all just a little bit too clunky. Despite Hellbat looking like a really interesting card, its fate is inherently tied to these starship cards, which I don't know how much you really want to commit to these. So all that said, that's it for this review. So let's rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Jim Raynor is a 3-star card. Warp Gate is a 4-star card. Void Ray is a 3-star card. Chrono Boost is a 4-star card. Ultra Capacitor is a 2-star card. Salvage the Bunker is a 3-star card. Hellion is a 3-star card. Oh, and Immortal is a 4-star card. And there you go. That's review number 2. Man, I really hope I'm wrong about the starship stuff. I want to be excited about it. Like, don't get me wrong. I want to play starships. I think they look really fun, but we've kind of already been soured a little bit on starships, and I'm not seeing just enough to get me that excited about it just yet. And then particularly this like aggressive starship package for Paladin. It doesn't play with the previous neutral starship stuff all that well. You know, like, I don't need an Arcanite Defense Crystal in this aggressive minion based deck or whatever. I guess Dimensional Core, that one's kind of okay now at 2 costs, but ultimately still just looks soft to me. So curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think it has a chance to get there? Is Raynor so busted that it'll be worth it and you can recover all that stuff later? We'll also see what Warrior has in store, but Shaman and Paladin don't have me super convinced just yet. But anyway, thanks as always for watching. Stay tuned until tomorrow for more reviews, and I will see you around.